stay here and learn some respect. No one in this house needs bush people like you two.
You locked my mother in a dog cage.
You think I'll stand here and do nothing?
I love the person I thought you were, but the woman standing in front of me now is someone else entirely.
Kofi had built his fortune the way other men built skyscrapers, layer by layer, year by year, with calloused hands and sleepless nights. People in Accra called him the humble billionaire. He still bowed when greeting elders. He still sent bags of rice back to the village every Christmas. And every time the cameras flashed, he would reach for his mother's hand first. "Mama is my first investor," he would joke on TV. She invested her whole life. When he married Esme, people said he'd finally found someone worthy of the life he'd built. She was young, stunning, sharp as broken glass, and she knew how to smile in front of people who mattered. At the wedding, she had held his mother's arm and called her mama so sweetly that even the old women whispered prayers of blessing for her. Then the cameras left, the guests went home, and reality moved into the mansion. Every time work called him away, Kofi handed his world into Esme's manicured hands. "Take care of Mama," he would say, kissing his mother's forehead. "And look after my son," he'd add, ruffling the boy's hair. The boy was 6 years old, all skinny knees and wide eyes. His name was Kendi, the child of a woman Kofi had loved before the world knew his name. That woman had died, and Kofi had sworn, "My son will never feel like a guest in his own father's house." So he believed with the simple faith of a good man that his home was safe. The neighbors were the first to notice that something wasn't right. The woman in the next compound would glance over the high white fence and see Mama Ya sitting alone in the backyard. No cushion beneath her, no umbrella against the burning sun. Sometimes she saw the boy standing in the corner of the courtyard, face to the wall, his small shoulders shaking. One afternoon she tried to joke with him through the fence. "Kendi, why are you standing there? Pan. Did you finish your homework?" Before he could answer, the glass door slid open and Esme's voice cut through the heat. "Get inside now. I don't want to see your face." Later that week, the neighbor stopped Kofi at the gate. "You should come home unannounced sometimes," she said carefully, "just to see how things are." He smiled, tired from meetings and calls in airports. Auntie. Thank you, but my wife is an angel. Mama likes her. The boy will grow with a good mother's hand." The neighbor swallowed the words she wanted to say. Some truths she knew could only be discovered, not delivered. Inside the mansion, away from curious eyes, the angel took off her wings. To Esme, the old woman was a stain on the clean modern lines of the house. The boy a reminder that her husband had lived a life before her. When the staff weren't looking, her voice turned sharp, full of knives. "You," she snapped at Kendi one morning. "Don't touch the sofa. Do you hear me? I don't want your village hands on anything." He nodded quickly. "Yes, Ma." He always called her Ma, never Mama. She didn't allow it. When he accidentally spilled a little water on the marble floor, she grabbed his arm so hard he gasped. "Look at this useless child. Your very existence annoys me. You are a walking mistake, a chung mat, an eyesore." Later, she stood over Mama at the dining table, lips curled. "Eat in your room," she ordered. "You're too slow. You make the table look like a clinic." Mama's hands trembled around her spoon, but she rose without a word. She had lived long enough to recognize hatred when she saw it. She had also lived long enough to know that complaining about a man's wife could poison his heart against his own mother. So she stayed silent for her son's sake, for the fragile piece of a house that did not belong to her. That morning, The Accra sun burned so fiercely it felt like it could split the earth open. The birds hadn't even finished their morning song when inside the wide, blinding white living room of the mansion, a sharp sound cracked through the air. Kang. The imported European vase slipped from the old mother's hands, rolled once across the table, then crashed onto the marble floor. Water splashed everywhere. Rose petals scattered. A long wet streak spread across the polished stone tiles. She froze. Her wrinkled hands trembled. I didn't mean to, she whispered, eyes darting toward the little boy on the sofa. Kendi jumped up, startled, trying to rush over to help. But before he could even touch the broken vase, Esme's voice cut through the room from the staircase, sharp as a whip. What was that? Her heels pounded down the steps, each click tightening the knot in the old woman's chest. Esme appeared, hair neatly tied back, wearing a cream silk dress, hugging her figure. She stopped and took in the scene. Spilled water-fallen flowers, the toppled vase, and the old woman's worn slippers soaked at the toe. Her eyes darkened. Without a word, slap. The hit came so fast Kendi didn't even scream in time. The old woman's head jerked to the side, her headscarf slipping as a bright red marked across her sagging cheek. The old woman's head sighed, her head scared, spat her expensive perfume, filling the air between across her sagging cheek. You think this is your dusty mud hut back in the village? Woman clutched her. The old woman clutched her cheek, voice shaking. Miss Esme, I am sorry. I'll clean it up right now. I'll clean it up right now. Esme let out a cold laugh. Esme, you should remember your place. Who are you? You should remember the owner here. You're a guest. Understand, you're not the owner. Kendi's eyes filled. Auntie, please. Kendi's eyes filled with tears. Grandma, he whispered. Esme snapped her head toward him. Shut your mouth. Esme snapped her head toward him. She barked, looking up. She barked, looking him up and down in his faded shirt. It's your little village blood that makes her so clumsy. Stepped forward. The grandmother quickly stepped forward, shielding the boy. Don't blame him. It's my fault. Don't blame him. My hands. It's my fault. My hands are weak. Esme shoved her hand. Esme shoved her hand aside, like swatting away a dead leaf. You two exhaust me. Exhaust me. I have guests coming this morning. I don't want them seeing this disgusting mess. I don't want them seeing this. She sighed dramatically, as if their presence dirtied the air itself. As if their presence get outside, she ordered, voice low and icy. Get outside, she ordered. The old woman hesitated, glancing toward the glass door, where the sunlight blazed white over the backyard. Glancing toward the glass door. It's very hot out there. The sunlight blazed white. Let me clean this over the back. Esme grabbed her wrist, squeezing so hard, the bones felt like they might crack. I'm not repeating myself. She dragged the old woman across the floor, her worn slippers scraping in short broken sounds. Kendi panicked and followed. Grandma, are you okay? Outside, the heat hit them like an open furnace. The iron dog cage sat by the back wall, empty since the dog was given away, but still carrying the stale, heavy feeling of something wrong. Esme stopped right in front of it. Get in. She pointed at the cage, her red nails sharp as knives. Stay there until I decide you can come out. The grandmother staggered backward, hands clasped. No, Esme, please. I'm old. I get dizzy. I can sit on the bench instead. You think you have a choice? Esme leaned in, face, harsh voice dipped in venom. If you don't like it, you can go back to your dusty village tomorrow. Here in Accra, every square foot of this land is worth more than your entire life. Kendi tugged at Esme's dress, voice cracking. Auntie, please. Grandma can't breathe in the sun. She's old, please. She flung his hand away like a speck of dirt. "Get out of my sight. If you talk again, I'll lock you in there with her." He froze, swallowed hard, but he kept staring at his grandmother, trembling. "Grandma," he whispered. She saw his eyes, saw the fear, the helplessness, and knew that if she resisted, he would be the one to suffer. She swallowed every ounce of shame the way she'd swallowed dirt and sweat her entire life. "All right," she murmured. "I'll go in." Her steps were slow and heavy. She bent, lowered herself, and crawled into the small metal cage. Kendi stared into the dark, dusty space, the smell of rust and old straw rising up. He remembered the dog's cries at night. I'm coming too," Kendi said. And before Esme could stop him, he crawled in after her. Kendi, the grandmother, gasped, "No, you!" But the iron door slammed shut with a metallic. The lock clicked a cold final sound. Esme looked at the two of them, huddled in the cramped space, her face empty and dry. "Good," she said quietly. "Stay there until this house feels clean again." The old woman gripped the bars. "Esme, I have high blood pressure. I can't stay in the heat too long." Esme's eyes flicked over her with the same indifference as looking past the smudge on glass. "Good. Then die there," she said lightly, as if discussing curtains. She turned, walked inside, and locked the sliding glass door. Music drifted from the living room, swallowing the child's soft sobs. The sun climbed higher. Soon, the metal roof of the cage turned scorching hot. The air thickened. Kendi felt his chest tighten. Sweat rolled down his neck and stung his back. "Grandma," he wheezed, "it's so hot." She pulled him close, leaning her back against the burning metal to shield him. Her skin sizzled with pain, but she clenched her teeth. "Lean on me," she whispered. "Don't cry. The more you cry, the harder it is to breathe." Kendi pressed his face to her chest, hearing her frantic heartbeat. Inside the house, laughter spilled, chairs scraped, glasses clinked. Each sound felt like an invisible slap, reminding them their suffering meant nothing in the pristine world behind those walls. The grandmother closed her eyes, thinking of her dusty village, of the tiny porch where she used to lay a mat for her son, whenever the sun was too hot. If only she hadn't come here. If only she had let him live his bright, successful life, without the burden of her existence. Grandma Kendi whispered, voice faint. "It's hard to breathe." She squeezed his hand, her bony fingers trembling. Don't think about the heat, darling," she panted. "Think about the river back home. Remember the cool water we used to bathe in." Kendi tried to imagine the clear stream around the rocks, the laughter of village kids splashing. But the metallic smell of rust and the suffocating heat dragged him back stronger than any memory. A tin roof above them crackled tiny tack sounds from the expanding metal. Each sound was a reminder this was not a place meant for humans. The old woman began to feel dizzy. Her vision blurred, as if someone had pulled a thin white veil over her eyes. She blinked rapidly, but everything only grew fuzzier. "Don't faint, not in front of him." "Grandma," Kendi's voice quivered as he felt her head slump onto his shoulder. "Grandma, don't sleep. Please, Grandma, don't sleep." He didn't know much about sickness, but he knew one thing. Every time someone was in the hospital on TV, people would shout, "Don't sleep, don't close your eyes." And suddenly terror seized him. Fear that if she closed her eyes, she might disappear like his mother once did. He staggered to his feet, stepping barefoot onto the scorching concrete. Pain shot through his soles like tiny needles, but he stretched his arms wide, trying to shield her from the sun, creating whatever tiny patch of shade he could. The sun beat down on his back mercilessly. For several seconds, Kendi felt as if thousands of invisible needles were stabbing his, mercilessly. For several seconds down his back in rivers, it wasn't cool. Invisible made him feel trapped inside a steaming pond. Sweat streamed down his back in rivers. She opened her eyes, barely a whisper made him feel trapped inside a steaming. "You'll get sick, Kendi." He shook his head, lips cracked open, voice barely a whisper. You don't need, you sit in the shade." "You'll get sick," Daddy said. He shook his head. Man protects his family. Cracked and dry, the word family made her eyes sting. Yusit had once said the same thing years ago when he was just a skinny young man in plastic slippers, standing under a leaking roof, so his little sister wouldn't get wet. Kofi had once said, Dowd years ago, proud that her son had grown up, skinny young man, that he would never let anyone hurt his family. Standing under a leaking, the one protecting, so his little sister was her 6-year-old grandson, trembling, standing against the scorching sun, in proud that her son had grown up, that he would never, she inhaled, throat burning, as if filled with, your father knew about this one, protecting her 6-year-old grandson, swallowed heart, standing against the scorching sun in her place, he whispered as if trying to hypnotize himself. She inhaled, throat burning as if filled with sand. Daddy always keeps his promises. He remembered last night's video call, his father in a hotel room. Warm yellow light behind him, smiling, tired but gentle. Daddy will be home soon. Be good to Auntie and help take care of Grandma for me, okay? He had nodded seriously, feeling like a real little man now, trapped inside a boiling dog cage. That promise was the only thing he held on to. A warm gust of wind blew through, not cooler than a breath from an oven. It carried dust and a faint smell of trash from the corner of the yard, making the old woman's head spin again. Grandma, drink. Kendi looked around desperately. There was no water, not a single drop. She wet her cracked lips, her tongue as dry as bone. Come, lean on me a little, she said softly, forcing her voice to stay calm, so you don't get dizzy. Kendi sat back down, pulling her gently into his lap, letting her rest her head on his small shoulder. He was tiny, fragile, but right now he was trying to be the pillar holding up her collapsing world. Grandma, his voice trembled. If you're tired, you can lean on me, but don't go. Please don't go. She smiled, a weak smile, but so tender, it seemed to soften even the murderous sun. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. I still need to wait for your daddy to come home and scold me for not taking care of myself. She joked, but it sounded like a prayer. Her eyes fluttered, fighting the darkness creeping around the edges of her vision. Every time things began drifting away, she grabbed his shirt, anchoring herself to reality. Listen to me, she said slowly, each word pulled painfully from her chest. There is nothing in this world worth forgetting who you are. Whether you're in a mansion or in a dog cage, you are still your father's son. Do you understand? Fighting. Kendi looked into her sunken, weary eyes around the edges. In them was a strange, fierce light. Every time things began drifting away, he grabbed his shirting herself to reality. I'm your grandson. Listen to me slowly. Each word pulled. She let out a soft laugh, her breath shaky. There is nothing in this world speaking English, forgetting who you are. Clever boy. Whether you're in a mansion, her smile faded and her shoulders trembled again. You are still another wave of dizziness. Do you understand? Her ears rang. Kendi looked into the music inside the house. The hum of the AC link was a strange fear. Everything sounded distant, muffled, drowned under heavy water. Only her heartbeat remained. And I'm your grandson. No cage can change that. Grandma Kendi shook her gently, a soft laugh, her grandma looking shaky. Look, I'm right here, speaking English too. She opened her eyes, dragging them back toward his tiny face covered in sweat, and shoulders trembled again. I'm okay. Another repeated, though it sounded like she was reminding herself. I'm fine. Her ears rang. As long as your father comes outside the house. Outside the cage, the sun continued its cruel journey across the Accra sky, ignoring the desperate pleas of a child and the fading breaths of an old woman. A black SUV, far away on the highway leading into the city. A black SUV sped across the shimmering heat, racing toward the white mansion. For the two prisoners inside the cave, the two prisoners trapped behind iron bars, had shrunk into the world, had shrunk into just a few small things. Breaths, heartbeats, and a fragile, fragile hope whispered like a prayer. As long as your father comes home. Your father on the highway into Accra. On the highway into Accra, the black SUV sliced through lines of high-rise buildings, leaving behind a ribbon of blazing sunlight. Blazing sunlight stretched out like a trail of fire, like a trail of fire. Kofi was driving alone. Kofi was driving alone. No chauffeur. He had told his secretary he needed air. His secretary he needed air. The truth on the highway to Accra was he missed his mother into Accra, his mother. A quiet, soft pull in his whispering, a softest whispering. I wonder what Mama is doing right now. You need to go home. He murmured, the corner of his mouth lifting at the thought of Kendi running toward him and wrapping his arms around his leg. Of his mouth lifting. But when the SUV rolled through the gates of Serenity Villa and wrapping his head around, like always, wasn't hurried footsteps. But when the warmth rolled through the gates of Serenity Villa, a cold, fine, tightening silence that made him switch off the engine. Footsteps. Stepping inside, he felt the emptiness at once. It was silence. The white walls seemed too clean, too, like every bit of life had been drained out. Made him switch off the engine immediately. Mama Kendi, no answer. Stepping inside, he walked through the living room, felt the emptiness, no sound of his mother's slippers, the white, no toys scattered about to clean, to still, like human life, had been drained out. The mansion felt like an abandoned luxury hotel. No answer. His heart began to sink through the living room, uneasiness around his human presence. The mansion felt like his voice was louder. Then from the staircase came the sound of heels. Each bedak clack, clack. Esme appeared like a living portrait, like a living dress. Softly curled hair. Silk dress. Expensive perfume floating around her, like expensive perfume floating around her, like mist. She smiled, brushing a lock of hair aside. She smiled, brushing a lock of hair aside. Her tone sounded like she just wrapped up a fashion show. Tones sound like someone caring for an elderly woman. And shoot, not like someone didn't bother with an elderly woman. And 6-year-old child didn't bother with. Immediately, no compliment. Voice hard as steel. Where is my mother? He asked. Immediately, voice hard as steel. Blinked, then stepped down another stair. Posture far too relaxed. Blinked, then stepped down another stair. Her posture. Kofi frown, too relaxed. Doing what? Sunbathing. She said bluntly. Kofi frowned. Burning off. Doing what? A village smelled. Sunbathing. Her words hit him like an invisible slap. For a few seconds, he simply stared, trying to understand whether she was making a cruel joke or telling the truth. He let out a short, warped laugh. He simply stared, trying to understand whether she was making a cruel. My mother is elderly, or telling the truth. Kendi is a child, out a short walk. How could interpret it however you want? Esme cut in, eyes gleaming with arrogance. My mother. If you want to know, go look for yourself. Kendi is a child. She turned about to head upstairs. Interpret it however you want. Right then, a coughing fit erupted from the backyard. Gleaming with arrogance. Not a normal cough. If you want, not a small harmless cough. Look for yourself, but the kind that comes from a person gasping for air. Broken. Choking. Desperate. Right then, Kofi froze, coughing fit. First he thought he had missed the backyard. Then it came again, a normal each sound slicing through the wall like a blade. The glass door leading outside. His voice called after him. He sprinted toward the glass door leading outside. Overreact. But he was, don't overreact. It's just. But he wasn't listening anymore. He threw the door open, scorching. Blast of scorching air slammed into his face. He had never run that fast in his life. The backyard was less than 40 meters long, but in that moment, it felt like a desert with no end. With each step, it felt like his feet were landing on fire. With each step, the hot wind slapped his face, burning away his last trace of doubt. The hot wind slapped his face. Something was wrong, burning away his love. Something was very, very wrong. Something was, and then he got closer. Something was very, and everything inside him shattered. And then he got closer. He saw his mother, the woman who had sold roasted corn and stale bread just to pay his school fees. His mother was curled up inside the old iron dog and stale bread. Her frail hands were wrapped around her 6-year-old inside the old. Her head rested weakly on the boy's tiny shoulder. Her frail hands were wrapped, her posture bent like a brittle branch about to snap. Her head rested. Kendi was gasping for breath. Tiny shoulder, swollen and red. Her posture, tiny voice about to snap. Kendi gasping for breath. Nothing on earth prepares a man for pain like this. Tiny voice cracking. A man can endure bankruptcy. Daddy, he can withstand betrayal. He can survive the storms of a cry. No man for pain like, but no man on this planet can bear the sight of his mother and his child being kept like stand betrayal. He can survive the storms of a cry. 3 beats. His heart slammed against his ribs, like it wanted to rip them of his mother and child, being his legs refused to move. His breath knotted in his throat, as if an invisible hand was squeezing it shut. His heart slammed against his ribs like it wanted to rip. The sound came out small, fragile, like a child lost. His legs refused to move. The old woman opened her eyes. His breath knotted in his throat. She tried to smile, though her lips were cracked. Mama. The sound came out small, fragile, like that smile, thin, aching, yet still loving, stabbed straight through his heart. Kendi reached an arm out, through the bars. Daddy, help us. Grandma is fainting. Kofi snapped out of his shock, and lunged at the lock. No thinking, no hesitation. He yanked it. Then again, and again, the metal burned his palms like hot coal. Blood burst from his skin, but he didn't stop. Crack! The lock snapped. The cage door swung open, slamming into the wall with a loud explosive bang. He rushed in, lifted his mother into his arms, just like she had once carried him over flooded streets after heavy rains. Mama, Mama, who did this to you? His voice trembled, not from fear, from a rage rising like a tidal wave. Kendi clung to his leg, sobbing. She locked us, Daddy. She said we smell like village, and that was the exact moment the spark hit the gasoline. Esme stepped closer. Arms crossed, her voice cold as air conditioning. Don't look at me like I'm a monster. I just taught them a lesson. A lesson. Those 2 words sliced straight into Kofi's eardrums. He turned toward her. No yelling, no screaming, no dramatic gestures. His silence was more terrifying than a lion's roar. His voice came out low, deep, cracked, heavy, like boulders tumbling off a cliff. You locked my mother in a dog cage. Esme shrugged, genuinely unbothered. So what? This house belongs to me. That sentence, simple, arrogant, cruel, broke something inside him, something that would never repair. The hot acre wind blew past, but inside Kofi's chest a storm was beginning to rise. He carried his mother to the single patch of shade under the only tree in the yard, gently laying her on the stone bench. Then he stood. There was no yelling, no cursing, no smashing of objects like people imagine a furious man might do. Kofi's silence was the real storm. He knelt down in front of the dog cage, still hanging open from the force of his earlier pull, and gently slid his arms beneath his mother's fragile body. "Mama, let me lift you." She was so weak she couldn't stand on her own. Her head fell onto his shoulder, her breath thin like a fading thread, her eyes bloodshot from heat and dust. Kendi clung to his father's back, his small hands trembling. The man stood up cautiously, as if lifting a piece of delicate crystal. He removed his suit jacket, the expensive one he wore to million-dollar meetings, and draped it over his mother's shoulders. "You're cold," he whispered, eyes fixed on her. She tried to lift a hand to his cheek, her voice shaking. "Kofi, don't blame your wife. I can endure this. As long as you're safe, that's enough for me." But she didn't know in that moment, inside Kofi's head, he could no longer hear anything. Not the music from the living room, not Esme's footsteps on tile, not the wind, not even his own heartbeat. There was only the image of his old mother dirt stained inside a dog cage, and the weak, broken breathing of his son, who had almost collapsed under the brutal, Accra heat. The pain inside him turned into a deadly inside him, turned into a deadly turned. He turned around, step by step, heavy, slow, heavy controlled. Each step crushed a piece of his own pride. A pride of a man who had loved the wrong person. The pride of a man who had loved, stood by the glass door. Face drained of color, stood by the glass. She had never seen him like this. Face drained of color. She had never seen him like this. Not raging, not shouting, not violent. A silence terrifying enough to stop the wind. Silent. A silence terrifying enough to stop the wind. Esme backed up half a step. Esme half a step, but his voice was frighteningly trembled. But his voice was frighteningly calm. "You are no longer my wife. From this moment, you are no longer hit like a blade cutting through stone." The sentence hit like a blade cutting through stone. No raised, but the finality in his tone was unmistakable. "You," Esme's mouth fell open. "Leave me for an old woman and a child who isn't even mine? You'd leave me for an old woman and a child who isn't even mine." The moment it worked she had ever spoken. The air turned to the moment it escaped her lips. The air turned to quietly behind his father. Kendi sniffled quietly behind his father shivered, and Mama's body looked at her with new eyes of a man with no, looked at her with new eyes of a man with no love, innocence, no patience left, no innocence. Dropped each word, and his voice dropped each word. Who locks her mother-in-law? A woman who locks her mother-in-law in a dog cage, his eyes burning red, his eyes burning red, is not worthy of being a mother to any child. R's face went pale, pale. Please let me explain. Let me explain. No need. His voice was granite. You don't need to explain. Need to explain. What you've done says everything. What you've done says everything. He walked past her as if she were nothing more than a stranger in his yard. More than a stranger in his path. Kendi tugged at his sleeve. The path. Kendi at his sleeve. "Don't leave Grandma. Daddy, don't." He knelt and embraced his son tightly. He knelt and embraced his son tightly. "We'll never let anyone hurt you or Grandma again. We'll never let anyone hurt you or Grandma again." His fury wasn't loud. His fear wasn't loud. Wasn't destructive. It was a cold, irreversible decision. A cold, irreversible final verdict. Ending a whole marriage built on vanity and lies. Ending a whole marriage. Sharp line drawn between real love and cruel hidden beneath pretty dresses. Between real love and cruel stood frozen, watching the man walk away with his mother and son. the two people she saw as burdens, until the villa door closed behind her, marking the collapse of her fake power. The two people in that silence for the first time in her life until the villa door closed felt fear, marking the collapse of her fate. But each step he took toward Esme carried the icy weight of a fury. It had been forced down for far too long. Esme felt fear. He said nothing. He pointed at the dog cage. Each step he took. This house belongs to you. Esme carried the icy weight of a fury. Esme lifted force down for far too long. I'm your wife, no. You said, pointed at the dog cage, rights.
This house to humiliate my mother. I didn't humiliate her. Esme, I only reminded them of their place.
Wife rights, rights.
Your mother doesn't know how to live like city people. I didn't stop. I only reminded them of their place. But the entire garden seemed to freeze.
What amid?
You dare stepped closer. You dare stepped closer and closer. Each step closer was a step, was a shard of his heart, being crushed underfoot. Crushed underfoot.
When he finally stood face to face with her face, he no longer wore the expression of the gentle man. The expression of the gentle man, she looked like a man who had just witnessed the unforgivable. Just witnessed his voice cracked open. You locked my mother and my son in a dog. Locked my mother, my son in a dog. I'll stand here and do nothing. You think I'll stand here and do nothing? For the first time uncertain, she stepped back for to monster turn. Blow this up, Kofi, don't blow up.
Only what? I only want he pressed each word like a blade. Each word like I only wanted them to die under the sun. Silence suffocated the air. Kendi clung to his legs, sobbing.
She told us to die there.
Daddy.
Esme palled.
You little don't touch my son. Kofi pulled Kendi behind him, his voice so deep the ground seemed to vibrate.
In his entire life, from poverty to wealth, from failure to success,
he had never felt anger like this. At that moment, this was no longer a disagreement between husband and wife. This was the line between a man protecting his family and someone who dared to violate the most sacred part of his soul. The moment that cage door snapped open, everyone's fate changed. And the real storm, not the Accra heat, but the one inside the heart of the man standing before that iron cage, had only just begun. News traveled faster than the Accra heat. By the next morning, just as the sun was crawling up from the horizon, Esme was taken to the ancestral village of her husband's family, a place ruled by the Council of Elders, the men and women who safeguarded the honor laws and traditions of the entire lineage. She arrived in the family's old car. No chauffeur, no bodyguards, no makeup, no designer bags. Yesterday, she had stepped onto the villa's marble floors like a queen. Today, she stood alone in the village square like a criminal. Whispers rose from every corner. Is that the daughter-in-law who locked her mother-in-law in a dog cage? Heavens, and she dared marry into the Kofi family?
A woman who disrespects a mother-in-law invites curses on the entire bloodline.
The 12 elders sat in a long row.
At the center was the low wooden stool reserved for offenders. Old, uncomfortable, and ice-cold. Esme had to sit on it. She bowed her head, but her eyes still flickered with wounded pride.
She thought they would scold her and let her go. She was used to being forgiven. She was used to getting what she wanted. But today was unlike anything she had ever faced. The oldest elder, Nana Bafor, spoke first, voice firm as stone.
What did you do to your husband's mother?
Esme bit her lip. She wanted to lie, wanted to blame the housemaid, wanted to twist people the way she always had. But dozens of eyes were staring at her, staring straight into her soul. She trembled. Only taught her to know her place. The entire courtyard erupted in outrage. Her place. She is your husband's mother. She raised him from nothing to greatness. And who are you to lock her up like an animal? Esme shrank back.
Looking into the elders' faces, she knew the judgment was already set. And when it came, it dropped colder than steel. From this day forward, you lose your title as daughter-in-law of this family. You lose the protection of this lineage. You lose the right to return.
Esme collapsed. She thought she had touched power, but she had only been a shadow standing in another man's light, a light she never truly understood. The next morning, sharp at 9 a.m., Kofi signed the divorce papers. Not a minute late. In the documents submitted to the court, he wrote only domestic abuse, especially toward the elderly and minors. His lawyer told him one simple truth. In this case, every asset belongs to you. She gets nothing. No house, no car, no alimony, no status. The entire empire she had flaunted, gone. That afternoon, right before she was forced to leave Serenity Villa, Esme stood in the courtyard, pulling a nearly empty suitcase. The sun wasn't hot anymore, but she was freezing. The housekeeper locked the villa gate. The guard carried out her last handbag and dropped it on the ground next to the dog cage. No one helped her. No one pied her. Kofi stood on the steps, holding his son. His mother sat nearby, weak but safe. He didn't look at Esme with hatred, only with the eyes of a man who had finally seen someone's real nature and had nothing left to say. "Kofi, you can't do this to me." Her trembling voice faded into the air like dying breath. He replied softly, "You did it to yourself." And as if fate intended it, the only place she was allowed to stand was beside the dog cage, the same cage where she had locked her mother-in-law and an innocent child. She stared at it, her knees buckled, her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in her life, Esme felt the same pain she once inflicted on others. But it was too late. No hands reached for her. No one stayed. The gate of the villa slammed shut behind her. The echo rang like a final verdict. Everything she had ever possessed, money, status, power, admiration, turned to ash because of one act of cruelty. And the woman who once walked proudly through a $1 million mansion was now left alone beside an old dog cage, the place where she had written her own life sentence. In the weeks that followed the devastating incident, Kofi devoted every hour to repairing what his mother and son had endured. He bought a modest but warm house in Labadi, where the morning sun streamed gently through wooden window frames. The old mother now had her own room, a nurse who cared for her 24/7, something she had never dreamed of having. No more shouting, no more cruel glances, only peace. As for the boy, Kofi walked him to the gate of his new school, one of the finest in all of Accra. The boy looked up, eyes still trembling with old fear. "Dad, will I ever have to go back to that house?" Kofi knelt down, placing both hands on his son's shoulders. "I promise you from today onward, no one will ever make you afraid again. I'm here now always." That afternoon, when they returned to Labadi, the old mother was sitting on the front porch, the golden sunset resting softly on her silver hair. She watched her son and grandson walking toward her, still holding hands tightly, as if afraid someone might pull them apart. She smiled, her voice fragile, yet full of warmth. "Kofi, you don't need a mansion to make your mother happy." A home is never built with money. It is built with the heart. Kofi bent down and hugged her. The boy rushed forward and wrapped his arms around both of them. Under the fading Accra light, 3 generations held each other close for the first time in years.